Dakor Rage.
Yes, so I heavily disagree, but I do appreciate the dialogue, and that's, I think, the latter bit there is by far the most important. So once again, great Scars art.
Yeah, excellent stuff. Excellent stuff.
Yeah, so weapon tokens and stuff. Basically, that's why we're addressing it in this case specifically, and then go deeper or into a deeper dive behind some of the motivations and current thoughts about end boss weapons, raid loot in general, and weapon tokens a la Castle Nathria. First off, the what and why. We're going to be adding an ability dagger to Regalon, boss 10, and removing the agility fist weapon from Skolex, and moving it to the jailer.
Capital T.
Yep, his first name, this represents a +1 additional weapon overall for the raid, and leaves only some healers without a weapon from those final 3 bosses. We're not likely to make a change to that, as there's a unique healer mace that we anticipate will be a pretty powerful option for those specs earlier in the...
What do you mean anticipate? You make it.
But surely this is about the number of available drops per healer per week from a player's perspective.
It's it's more about the yes, but it's more about the item level stuff.
Oh, yeah, of course, that too. So, we've got a Dakor call out.
Yeah, we do indeed.
And it's not even a happy face, it's a thinking face, and that's dangerous.
Always sarcastic.
As to why we're making this change, Sepulchre of the First Ones has the highest amount of bosses with increased item levels, 3 bosses over the traditional 1 to 2, which we felt was appropriate to support both Regalon and Lords of Dread, feeling like a high-level encounter, high-level encounters you could tackle in any order, as well as to cement the clear jump in difficulty after Anduin, which is, of course, the first week hurdle. However, even 1 extra boss at the +7 threshold created a level of imbalance that felt less textured in the some have one, some don't way, and more like a small few being excluded. Exclusion to this degree wasn't intentional, that's why we're acting on it. Should we talk about Dakor's, the output of his brain?
Yep.
Is brain excrement. The healer mace that is referred to in the section above is very bad based on initial testing and after the 400 to 500% buff it got this week. Doesn't have any secondary stats.
Yep.
The bonus healing effect it gives isn't competitive with a high item level weapon with more raw stats that it replaces. It requires you to have a very specific healing ability to even get any benefit from it for the effect. For some healing classes, this is a common enough use spell, like Flash of Light for Holy Paladin.
Yep.
The spell you literally never cast unless a string of very specific criteria met. Matt, if I remember correctly, it still is, because I've not played Holy in ages, Flash of Light's just fast, inefficient for mana.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, of course. So
precisely.
This will mean that your squeaky clench time healing will be better.
Actually,
I should look at what the effect is. I'm not a healer, so I play a hunter. I'm fucking stupid.
Yeah, the effect is basically a 1 big additional heal. Effectively, the Genesis Lathe. And this article is fantastic, by the way. Did a great job of putting the numbers together and making sense of it to the point where it's like, yeah, this is basically Blizzard Go. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. So essentially, the point here is that from Blizzard's side, there isn't a higher item level, healer one-hander, because this one is so good. But then obviously for players is it that good? Which is one side of the discussion. Yep. And then I suppose another one that I think about from maybe a raider's perspective, like a more casual raider, is you're excited to get a new weapon to get that jump up. And it's good that this one is early on. But certainly it means there's fewer drops, right? Fewer eligible drops per week per person. That's flexibility.
Yeah. So it's really interesting, I think, because the effect means you've got your Flash of Light, you've got your abilities that you don't really use, which means you're basically big buff to that ability. So you can see the designer going, okay, well, this button's never used. We can transform this button into something that's better. But it's not, because I'm not sure about how the mathematics work out for how much it improves or how mana efficient the heal is with Flash of Light. But I saw someone in, I can't remember if it was the article or if it was the comments, talking about the mana efficiency of Mistweaver monks using Enveloping Mist. and it's something like 4 healing per mana spent. And they were like, well, this other spell that I use is 8 healing per mana spent, which means this is literally half as efficient. And you're like, okay, well, that's really quite pointless then. It's like you could see it being, this is a really cool tool, but they need to make it absurdly strong to be worth it, because you're basically what you're doing is you're going, well, I'll have 2.5, I think folks said, less raw healing, around average 2 to 2.5%, and it's shifted into this 40-second, or this one cast every 40-second window, which is a great design space, but it's just not useful.
Yeah.
It's not useful, and it's, doesn't make sense. So it's like, there's a world where if this was strong enough, or this had something like, instead of being a big heal, because it is basically, I think, just a big heal, like 11k or something. If this were something like a very big shield, that would be probably nicer, but it would need to be a big shield. Or if it was something like, I suppose you couldn't give them versatility. If it was something like a damage reduction for a short period of time, you could lead with it. That would be interesting. Or if it made that cast free or something like that. There's definitely a pretty, good case for this, but in its current iteration, it's not working very well. Yeah. And it's just confusing, and if you can't see the designer's intent, you're like, well, what the fuck is this?
Yeah.
Because it doesn't work.
So there's that, but then, there's more.
Yeah.
And we're gets into, the old thing of Salute Bag says, weapon, or, the tokens in Castle Nathria, they were good. And then the developers go, aha, but, and that's what we're going to be getting into. But there's some more. However, this led to some legit questions. Why don't all classes have a stronger weapon in each raid? And furthermore, why not use a weapon or weapon tokens like Castle Nathria did? Yeah. These may not answer all those perfectly, but I'd like to share some thoughts and shed light on the kinds of things we think about when designing items and loot tables that will, push the conversation forward. Good, and push forward it did, because good news, Skarzard, you have procced a Thinky box from Dakor. So we'll have to see what his Thinky box says. But first, philosophically speaking, we think there's a lot more to items than just the stats they provide on a mechanical level. Fair play. Yep. We put so much time into naming and placing them appropriately because they're a way to flesh out the stories of the enemies and environments they come from. I get the designer's intent. I feel like that is quite rarely achieved.
Yeah, well, I guess here's what I think is interesting. In terms of the execution, I think they do this very well, except for flesh out. The end result is that nothing feels too out of place.
Oh, yeah.
That's what the achievement largely is, as opposed to this has elevated the experience of, oh, this is really interesting. It's just, oh yeah, this is fine, this makes sense. Which is, is that necessary? No. Is it great that they're thinking about it for the player experience? Yes. So I think it's just a case of maybe they need to push the boat out in some more instances. And I mean, I think the Genesis Lathe is potentially a good example of that.
Yeah. Well, it is for sure. So to move on then, as you suggest in your post, we certainly could have included an axe over a warglaive in the Lords of Dread fight if our goal was purely covering every spec. But let's look at it from a different angle. You're fighting Mal'Ganis, debatably the most well-known demon in all Warcraft lore, and the only demon in any of Shadowlands' 3 raids. From that perspective, it might be weirder if we didn't drop, Demon Hunter-specific weapons from that fight. Mm-hmm. So let's see what Dakor, who, he's our resident Mythic Raider. So we can sort of go to him to get the Mythic Raider thoughts. This part I don't really understand. While you could argue that fleshing out, adding to a really interesting story through loot is a good thing, that should not come at the expense of gameplay. Both should be great. They shouldn't compete with one another like this, as one will always lose out. Besides, the names and stories of most of the weapon/loot in the new raid aren't actually very interesting. Sure, some have cool flavor text and names, but you're telling me in order to do this, you also need to make it so that not all classes can have a higher item level weapon? Why? Why not have both? If a class or spec prefers the effect weapon, then they can choose to use it. If it turns out raw stats and item level is better, they should be able to use that instead. I'm sure it'll feel really great for some specs with a lower item level weapon whose effect isn't all that great, seeing others get max item level ones from the last few bosses. I suppose they can just repeatedly tell themselves, but mine has a few extra words in the alt text. Pog!
Yep.
that's how it's going to feel to a bunch of people.
Yep. And I think I have the solution, which is, unfortunately, with like a lot of my solutions, they are utterly pointless because if anyone at Blizzard hears them, they'll go, well, we don't have the resource to do that, so fuck you. Maybe they won't say that out loud, but they'll think it. Both. And the rework the loot so it becomes a warglaive or drops a warglaive for a Demon Hunter. I mean, personal loot, why not? Well, I suppose that's the problem. Personal loot, you drop the warglaive for the Demon Hunter. Oh no, I can't trade it because it's an axe. Yeah. So you have other problems to solve. But that's kind of one of the things where, oh, hang on. I've solved it.
Uh-oh.
I've solved it. Weapon tokens. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, you get a token. It's an axe for most people, but for Demon Hunters, it's a warglaive, and it's a cool warglaive. It's unique. Maybe it's got the aesthetic of Mal'Ganis or something. You're like, sweet, grand. So I think that's basically the point.
So basically, all of this is happening because you could get that token, and then you can maybe right click on it, and it turns into the thing for you.
Yeah.
Obviously, for Blizzard, they would say, well, that is one step between player and boss that makes it no longer you picking a sword up off the boss.
Fair.
So
fair enough.
Yeah, I'd say on balance, it would make the experience of just raid better. Anyway, every loot table on any boss should help tell a story, which adds to the excitement of receiving the drops themselves. If you had boss stories like other MMOs, sure. I mean, there's one or two bosses generally in each raid. Like, in fairness, Aerith Mortis has more cool bosses than most.
Definitely.
Because they're able to cash in on that lore, of course.
Yeah.
But anyway, to continue then, there's layers to this, of course. Harder or more iconic encounters often deserve a more unique or powerful reward. But they're a tool we use for our game to feel more immersive. Another example from Sepulchre is Artificer Zymok's Return. There are a pair of swords that use the same model, where one is a relic, the cartel stolen from the raid, and the other is a replica of the same blade they've made with the intent to auction it off at Tazavesh. Compared to 9.0's tokens, while there was a higher level of equality among drops in the raid, the excitement was often lower in a relative sense. This is in part due to delayed gratification, because with the token, as he says here, you've got to zone out to, go to your sanctum to get the thing, and in part due to the disconnect in what you actually got out of them. Despite having some very cool Covenant appearances, they didn't feel grounded in the story of the raid or the content you got the tokens from, which led to the specific drops feeling less memorable overall. I mean, so there's like a few things here. There's a few things like, how many times have they done something like this and no one has noticed?
Yeah, that's the unfortunate bit where...
Because the one's just going to be called Wibbly Doo the Gobsmacker and Zai lore name. And most people just be like, oh, click, click, done.
Yeah.
Unless it's like, this is Agramar's sword. There it is.
Yeah.
Or this is Sylvanas' bow. So that's like a tricky little thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is... it's really awkward. I feel like this is possibly a case of misplaced resources, where this is really cool, but it would be nicer for them to make relatively generic gear and then focus on really cool bits. I think just because so few people notice this stuff that... I don't want to say don't do it because people don't notice it, because then you have a game that's, only big, bing, bing, wahoo moments, as opposed to anything cool. But they can maybe do that with gear overall. Move it to like, hey, we're going to leave this stuff... vaguely boring, and then we'll have some cooler bits, or highlight them. Something like that might work.
Yeah, and then of course with the tokens, I like the tokens because I thought they just work quite well for the actual logistics of playing the game. Fair on the delayed gratification, but I mean, you could just right click and pop up a little window that just says which one do you want. If you wanted to get rid of the delayed gratification bit, there would obviously still be a step in between, click on boss, get sword. But maybe that could happen. Oh, is he solved the game again?
Solved the game again. This is actually the framing to do it. Unidentified. Just, you've stolen enough from Diablo, steal that as well. Unidentified weapon. You identify it, it's exactly what you need.
There you go.
You know, you could even, and then there you go. That's the narrative frame. Well, obviously it's going to be like, well, what do I mean? It's always what I need. That's going to feel strange as opposed to getting nonsense. But you go, okay, well, I've got it. Especially if you're looking personal loot. I think people won't even notice that. Maybe it will get a little bit rough, but I think that's definitely one solution. You could maybe narratively frame it as this is an unidentified weapon, you know, and use some other trickery to make it exactly so it's like narratively framed. You get exactly what you want, but it's also an unidentified weapon. Maybe you could do that, but that would have like, oh, what's this? Ah, interesting. And then you click it. Ah, fuck. Yes.
All you need
It's
is
a
some
good thing,
flavor
maybe.
text that says right click to
Yeah.
identify.
Yeah.
You know, you don't need to unlock the box of identification or, just
Yeah.
right click to identify. Do it with flavor text. That,
Yeah.
that would work. I like that.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting because Samurai says, isn't that the same as token? Yes, and that's the point. But it's an unidentified weapon. It's not a token that you click and feels gamey. If it's an unidentified weapon, then it is the weapon in your bag. It's just magically obscured by something, so you magically unobscured.
Yeah.
I'm like, fuck, yeah, that's exactly what I want. Yeah.
So it's like it's achieving the goal, but that's
Yes.
a way where it, it feels thematic still. Well, thank you, Frostglare, for the donation.
Yep.
So I like that. That's good.
Yeah.
Let's see what that course. Oh, we have caps. Uh-oh. While it certainly isn't true in some cases, that getting actual weapon drops can feel much better in the moment than a redeemable token, I would much rather have a more powerful weapon from a token than a weaker/lower item level one drop normally. For the last part about loot not feeling grounded in the content you got the token from, hello, have you not seen some of the bosses you have itemized in the entire history of WoW, or even just this expansion? I think he's a little bit...
Peeved. Yep.
I think he's a little bit peeved, yeah. He must have eaten Weetabix that morning. He's full of energy. Kel'Thuzad, I say that, don't eat. Starting your day off with a bunch of wheat's probably not a good idea. Anyway.
No.
Kel'Thuzad drops a 2H sword. It's literally the one that Soul Render wields. Oh, Dakor, don't do them like this. Oh, they're already beaten up. Okay, so KT drops the sword from Soul Render. I mean, from Blizzard's perspective then, they're like, why does KT have Soul Render's sword?
They probably have a good reason for it.
I'm sure that's a great wee story. Anyway, beasts can drop gold and all manner of valuable loot. Are we really going to use that reason to justify bad raid optimization? You know what? That does make some sense. Another goal of ours is to have loot evenly distributed throughout a raid, such as a variety in things groups value differently across bosses and even entire wings. This helps groups who are struggling to progress on a specific difficulty still get useful loot while raid clearing, while also serving as a nice incentive for groups to push ever so slightly into a higher difficulty to gain a foothold. This idea is what led us back to making certain unique weapons. Initially, we called these cantrips.
Internally? That's interesting.
Internally, we call these cantrips in Sanctum of Domination, like Jotun
Jotun
from the 9, or Cruciform Vein Ripper from Painsmith. Their unique effects were on par with a higher item level bump, but we were also able to let them drop earlier and enhance the experience of defeating those important characters within our setting. You see, here's the deal. Now, this is absolutely nothing to do with Skarsgård. Because Skarsgård's working in raids, itemizing a raid. And it's like, well, yeah, these are important characters in our setting. My job is to give them good drops to make it interesting, tell a story.
Yep.
So, who the fuck is Painsmith? What's he doing? What's he all about? Who the fuck are the 9? I mean, I know who the 9 are because we do lore videos. Have they been important? I mean, I know more about the 9 via Cataclysm questing than I do via the Shadowlands. So I could be behind this if even the slightest effort was put into making these characters. These are, I don't know, narrative functions in the setting. I mean, Painsmith isn't even that.
I mean,
He's just a good boss.
Yeah, but that's the thing. And I guess this is one of the problems we have with the story in general is a lot of the time there's so much story in World of Warcraft that is, how do I put this? Imagine if you were playing Dark Souls, but the items had no descriptions,
Ooh.
or you didn't really go around corners or look at stuff. It's a case of you have really loose world building lore stuff, but so much of it never leaves their offices that it's all implied to us as opposed to actually there. Because you could ask someone, okay, well, who's Painsmith? I can't even remember his name now. Rasnal? No, that's Soul Render. Rasnal, is it? I can't remember.
Yeah, sure.
But they go, okay, there's Painsmith. Painsmith has been the architect of all the Dungeon Journal stuff. Has been the architect of the torture methods and the forging, all that stuff. Really, really, it plays a beautiful part in the ecosystem of the Maw and of Torghast.
Oh yes.
But that's in a dungeon journal, and we never experience it. It's just like it's there, but we don't care. And you can kind of go, well, of course they don't care. They're going to be raiders. It's the job of the developer to make us care by making them actual characters, and that's kind of I think basically the problem.
Yeah, so it's like good goal, Skarzard, but unfortunately, the rest of your company's not supporting it.
Yeah, I mean, like transplant this idea onto, I guess Black Temple or ICC. Suddenly, you've got something for at least a lot more of the bosses, as opposed to who are all these clans. I guess it's kind of the same as Legion, where like Antorus had a load of bosses. They're like, who's this clan?
So here's a great example. People will go around saying that there's a big plot hole in how did the Titan Souls get to Antorus?
Yeah.
Because last we knew, the lore of the Titan Souls, right? Like they weren't captured in Antorus.
Yeah, they were.
Who got them?
Mm-hmm.
Blizzard have never commented. People say this is a plot hole.
Yep.
Well, there is a character. What you call him? Frogger Bridge character?
Frogger Bridge, that was...
Soul Hunter.
Oh, shit, yeah. Iminar.
What's the character called? Iminar the Soul Hunter? Iminar the something? Yeah. There you go. Apparently that's the story. That's the cool story of how the Titan Souls ended up there.
Mm-hmm.
Just nobody seems to have noticed this.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, well, people don't pay that much attention to the boss names, but also, like, it's... Like, that's a theory, but could we have the story, please?
Yeah.
Iminar, yeah. So, a bit of a... Again, the show don't tell stuff.
I think they have... Well, I guess that's the thing. I think this could be solved because you don't want to just be like, well, if you don't have time to make all these characters, just give us 3 bosses then. You don't want that.
No.
Maybe you sort of do if they're really substantially better designed individually. But, generally speaking, I think the play might then be to try to condense your efforts a little bit more. Because obviously, I don't know, this is literally just me spitballing. But like with the weapons, cut down the amount of time you spend on talking about, or you're writing internally about why, what the target is, or what Painsmith's doing, or what Soul Render or Dorsman's doing. And just go, we're going to put a load of effort into like these 3 figures and make them substantially more important. Which they sort of already do with the big named bosses, but
the big monkey boss.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's
the best example so far. Like,
yeah, that was
so great,
so good. Yep.
Yeah. I should go do that right. I should also say thank you to Jason Tai for joining us.
That's a good point. I completely forgot. They've got outside the raid to do all that stuff as well.
Yeah.
I was just thinking how to do that within the confines of a raid. I guess you have your raid designers talk to your story people and have like, okay, well, what would be a real, what characters have you used this expansion that we could pull in here for a reason?
Yeah.
And then you've got,
and now to continue it on then, Skarsgård finishes saying, to be clear, 9.0's tokens did solve a problem for some players, and there's a lesson to be had in response to them. While a 7 item level disparity is rarely ever a barrier to classifiability, the feeling that everyone was on an even playing field, along at least one axis, is clearly an idea that resonated strongly among some of you. I don't want all of the above speak to sound like we're never going to iterate on weapons, or that people who liked how 9.0 played out were just flat wrong. Just that, tokens clearly solve only one slice of the problem while denying, or at least hindering, the ability to achieve the other goals, basically, that they have for itemization.
Yep.
There you go.
Yep. That's
True.
I guess that's a very interesting problem where I think the solution again is if you can't achieve all of your goals, you have to prioritize which ones are more important, and it's worth reprioritizing which players it's important to, or how many. No, maybe not how many players, but the user stories of the game, and figure out which is which. For all I know, they're doing this anyway, and they have come to the conclusion that this stuff's better, and I just disagree with their decision, which is obviously completely fine.
Yeah. Yeah. So there we go, and it's good that the dialogue occurs.
Yep, absolutely, because otherwise, an expansion ago, we would have had nothing.
Yeah.